Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Joining us now, Ezra Levin, a co-founder and co-executive director of the Indivisible Project. He's been on many times before, leads a national staff supporting thousands of local indivisible projects. Ezra, nice to see you, my friend.
Dean, great to see you.
It's Fight Back Week. So you're one of the main fight back groups, Indivisible. I look back at my notes. You were on late November. We talked about what you were planning. You did talk about seeing at the time a surge of people wanting to get involved. So take us to now. Now it's early March. The economy's teetering. The stock market's crashing. America's coming close. It's a whole different world. But what are you seeing in terms of Indivisible?
Look, what I'm saying is a wave of engagement of normal, everyday folks around the country looking at what this administration is doing, looking at what this Republican Congress is doing, looking at what Elon Musk is doing, and say, "Oh my gosh, we've got to do something about this." And they're organizing. They are organizing these volunteer local indivisible groups. Look, we had more local indivisible groups join in November than any month since 2017. We beat the November month in December. We beat the December month in January. We beat the January month in February. It is March 10th as we record this, and I think we've had about 80 new indivisible groups in March. We are in just about every single congressional district in the country right now. And these folks are talking to their neighbors. They're getting them into local group meetings. They're going and asking their Democratic members to fight back. They're asking the Republican members to stop backing this egregious, heinous, deeply unpopular agenda. And I think they're turning the tide. I think they're changing what's possible at the national level. We're sure as heck not done with what we need to do, but we're changing the political environment and we're doing that at the local level and it's bubbling up to the top.
Yeah, the leadership is coming from the grassroots up. And I saw that Invisible was involved with, I think, Move On and another organization, some of the protests last month. We
hmm
covered on the show. I played a lot of clips. I was so happy to see that kind of stuff. Can you share a little bit about that? And they were opposed to Elon Musk's cuts at various institutions, government agencies.
Yeah, look, I wrote a newsletter a couple weeks ago that took a handful of headlines from February of 2017 and a handful of headlines from February of 2025. And save for a mention of Elon Musk in one of them, you wouldn't know which year we were talking about. In February of 2017, we were showing up at town halls all across the country, telling members of Congress to stop backing Trump and his terrible agenda. At the time, they were trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And in 2025, in February, there was the first congressional recess where members of the House of Representatives were back home in their districts. And in deep red districts, we saw crowds of constituents showing up and telling Republicans, "Hey, why on earth are you backing Elon Musk and his raid of the federal government?" These are Republicans and independents and Democrats, but not just activist types, not just lefty types. These are constituents from of all stripes who are against what's happening. And they're not just showing up at Republican district offices. We saw folks showing up at Democratic offices and Democratic town halls and asking them to fight back. And you know what? Some of those Dems are listening. Some of those Dems walked out of the address to Congress that Trump gave because they were hearing from their constituents. Again, I think we're early in this right now, but
Right.
constituent power is having an impact. And we're about to head into a next congressional recess next week. I hope we see a lot more of it.
So do I. I think it's great. So when you had well, let me get your reaction to this. I saw Chuck Todd on now CNN. He was just on, and he was trying to make a distinction between the idea of, well, there's the progressive wing that's very animated Democratic Party who wants Democrats to fight harder, and then there's sort of this moderate wing of the party that doesn't. And he was making it sound like it's the grassroots. I haven't seen that. I've seen every Democrat who calls that wherever they are on the spectrum wants Democrats to fight harder. I don't know if he meant there are certain people in frontline districts that are concerned, but among the base, Indivisible is not just progressives, are they? Is it just Democrats of all stripes that are joining and getting involved?
I have seen this kind of analysis a lot, and I
Yeah.
don't, I think it's among people who have not actually talked to the folks who are organizing on the ground.
Yeah.
And it's almost like this old-fashioned frame that is used to evaluate all political questions. Is it the left? Is it the centrist? Is it the right? And it's somewhere on that spectrum always. And look, indivisible group members look, there are progressives, there are Democrats, there are independents, there are former Republicans, or even moderate Republicans who think their party has left them. I think it's actually somewhat difficult to categorize it purely on an ideological spectrum. And the real defining feature of indivisible members right now is they think we're in a constitutional crisis. They think this is not politics as usual. And regardless of what they might think about healthcare policy or education policy or tax policy or immigration policy, they think, my God, we got to be standing up to this would-be authoritarian. We got to actually be organizing to push back and save our democracy. And I see that from, the mods. I see that from the more conservative Dems. I see that from the progressives. And I frankly agree with it. We don't control the House, the Senate, or the presidency. We do not have
Right.
agenda setting power right now. We don't have the ability to put a bill on the floor and say, this is our vision for the future. What we have the ability to do right now is organize and say no to the bad stuff. And that is an ideologically diverse coalition, both off Capitol Hill and in some cases on Capitol Hill.
I agree. And that's what I've heard from listeners. It's not been people like, I'm a progressive and I want Democrats to fight harder on a policy issue. No one's calling, going, I want Medicare for all. They're
That's
like,
right.
I want them to fight back against Trump. What
Yeah.
is going on? If Democrats didn't want us to get worked up, then don't paint Trump as the fascist that he is before the election, because they did paint him what he is. And they didn't have to scare us. We know who the guy is. We knew he'd be bad. And I think he's worse. Like tomorrow's 50 days into this nightmare. And it truly is a nightmare of unparalleled precedent. Like
Yeah.
there's so much to cover with him, where they're really trying to reimagine our government, what it means to be an American. I really believe that there's something deeper going on. What are the things that are there any things that we're missing that concern you, or that you listen to Indivisible members who are raising it and the press is just missing out?
Look, we came out with the new Indivisible guide about a week after the election. So it was Indivisible, a guide to democracy on the brink. And what we predicted in that moment was, one, this guy who did not have a mandate was going to overreach. We knew he was going to pursue Project 2025 after spending the entire election trying to distance himself from Project 2025. And two, we thought that meant there was going to be backlash, not just from Kamala Harris voters, not even just from non-voters, but also from Trump voters who wanted lower prices for bread and are instead getting Robert Kennedy dictating vaccine policy for them and their kids. We knew there was going to be backlash, and the question was, could we harness that in order to strengthen the pro-democracy coalition and fracture the MAGA coalition? I will say, I didn't know Elon Musk was going to be the president. I did not predict that as of November. I didn't
Right.
predict the role that he was going to play. I thought they were going to engage in pretty dangerous behavior. I thought Trump was going to appoint a lot of lackeys. I didn't know there was going to be an Elon Musk leading from the White House. And that has the downside because he's doing a lot of damage right now. The upside is he is the weak link in the MAGA chain. I've never, in 8 years at least of doing this, seen something that polls as poorly as the richest man in the world is coming after your Social Security check, which is exactly what's happening right now. And we would do well to focus on him as a weak link in that MAGA chain. The Republicans who are facing angry constituents, what the constituents were angry about was this random billionaire who was threatening their Head Start, their Social Security, their Meals on Wheels. That's what they were angry about because that is what he's doing. So I think there's a danger to it, obviously, that we're all seeing. But as long as we're going to be facing this danger, we should take advantage of the fact that this guy does not have public support.
That's very true. And you mentioned Social Security. I keep trying to raise it to people without scare people, because there are people who listen who it's a lifeline and I don't want to scare them. But I've seen the Trump playbook. We've seen it play out now where they lie about like USAID and they
Yeah.
use it to justify cuts. In the case of Social Security, what they're doing, their lie is that there are millions of dead people getting checks. That's not true. And he doesn't need an act of Congress. Social Security Administrator can purge X number, whatever. It could be 100,000, it could be a million, it could be 5 million. And then the burden is on you to get back on Social Security when they're laying people off of Social Security because there's no one there to pick up the phone to respond to you, and you're screwed over. So I'm deeply concerned about that. What is your take, Ezra? Are you concerned about Social Security as well in that regard?
Yeah, look, I think that the Republicans in Congress know not to say we're going to come and cut your Social Security because they know
Right.
the constituents be absolutely furious about that. They even know to say that about Medicaid too. They're refusing to say we will absolutely cut Medicaid, but they're putting forward a budget proposal that will require cutting of Medicaid. When it comes to Social Security, I think you're absolutely right. The most likely way this goes down is through administrative changes. They're able to say, no, 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 no. If you are a recipient of Social Security in good standing and doing everything right, there's no problem. You don't have anything to worry about. But lo and behold, thousands and thousands and thousands of people are going to be caught up in the bureaucratic rigmarole that this administration puts them through. So I don't know what comes next. I know what the policy agenda is right now that they're pushing, but if anybody thinks they are out of ideas circa March 10th, God, I got another thing coming for you. The Project 2025 is about 30 3% implemented so far. They got about two-thirds left to go. And it doesn't end with just an attack on social and economic policy. It ends with an attack on voting rights. It ends with an attack on your ability to hold free and fair elections and protest and have free and independent media actually cover what's going on. And the downstream effects on that, you bet your butt it's going to come after your Social Security and your Medicaid and your Medicare. That is obviously where this ultimately ends up. And before we get there, yes, there's some scary things that they're going to do, even using the administrative power that they've got right now.
And I appreciate you flagging that because we're going to, as we get closer to elections, it's something we're going to have to cover. And it's going to be Democrats in blue states holding the line if they can in terms of state legislators. But what about, I'm just curious, like, what was the reaction to the Indivisible base to Representative Al Green standing up to Donald Trump at the speech last week?
I mean, we need heroes to rally around. It was a heroic act. Look, I think courage is contagious. I think people are looking for that courage and they mimic that courage. When I saw him do that, I was cheering for every other Democrat in that room to stand up and go out with him. That's what I would have liked to see. I was shocked to see 10 Democrats then the next day vote to censure him along with all of the Republicans. And I was shocked to see Leader Jeffries call some of the members who protested either with signs or with dressing up in pink into his office to yell at him. I don't think that's the kind of leadership we need. And when you ask people around the country what they're looking for, they want somebody to stand up. That's
Right.
what they want. That's where the energy is. Look, there is a reason why congressional Democrats have a 21, 22% approval rating across the country. Obviously, the Republicans aren't supporting them, but also Democrats themselves from around the country want to be proud of their party. They want to have heroes who they can rally around and say, "Yep, I'm with these folks. They're actually fighting for me." And if they don't see it, it's not going to work out for the party members. Let me just tell you that. There's only so long that you as a political party can be this distant from the folks who call themselves members of that party before they start saying, well, we need to change parties. We need to change party leadership. We need to change
Right.
party members. That's the inevitable consequence of not leading in accordance with what your constituents want.
I'm chatting with Ezra Levin, the co-founder of Indivisible. My concern is that the Democrats' leadership fighting and the strategy they have chosen would depress Democrats from fighting more and getting engaged. But that hasn't happened, and that was my biggest concern. The concern for some of them is that some of them are going to be primaried, effectively or not. We're going to find out. But what I found curious, Ezra, I have Democratic members of Congress on, and a month ago I was saying to them that before polling showed that listeners to my show are calling up and they want you to fight harder. And they're like, we're fighting hard. And I'm like, you're fighting. And they're really nice people. They're ones who've been on my show for years. And when I was getting the senses, they were fighting the old playbook. They were louder than Jeffries might be. But,
Yeah.
they're like, well, we had a press conference and, we post videos on Instagram and some of that is good. Some of it reaches people. But I don't know if we were too demanding or not. I'm glad they've animated more. I don't think we were too demanding. I'm just trying to be nice. I'm trying to find I have compassion for them because they're in a hard
Yeah.
place. They
Yeah.
can't change the agenda like you're saying,
Yeah.
but we've seen a change. I mean, are you happy that we're seeing some change in the right direction?
Oh yeah, and look, I don't think we should only be yelling at Dems. Look, if
Hmm.
all you're doing is using sticks and whacking people in a nonviolent way about like what they're doing on Capitol Hill, eventually they're going to tune you out. Eventually they're going to be like, oh,
Right.
these folks are always just yelling at me. We have to find ways to celebrate them when they're doing the right thing. So folks like Maxwell Frost and Jasmine Crockett and AOC and Chris Murphy, people who are out there really leading on this fight, we should be cheering them. When Al Green stands up and does a courageous thing, he should be swarmed with fans, with appreciation. He should get his flowers, and we should do that. Now, when it comes to Congress, I think what it requires of us is to pay close attention to not just what they're saying, but what they're doing. This week is a good example of that. This week is going to end in one of two ways. Either Congress passes a funding bill, or there's a government shutdown. That's it. Those are the two options. And whether or not we go one path or the other depends not just on what Republicans do, but also how Democrats respond to what Republicans do. Republicans right now are essentially threatening Democrats unless you go along with our budget bill, our MAGA-friendly budget bill. Look, we're going to blame you for shutting the government down. And so Democrats have to decide, are they going to fight back? Are they going to actually withhold their vote unless there are protections against what Musk is doing? Are they going to give a blank check to this administration that allows Musk and Trump to continue doing what they're doing? What is their move? Now, that's something that is an actual vote that every member of Congress is going to have to take. And for the ones who do the right thing, Great. We should celebrate them because that's
Right.
a message to the others. Oh, wow, that's where the energy is. I get support when I do that. So we should thank the
Good
ones that
point.
do the right thing, and then we should provide constructive criticism to those who don't do the right thing. I think there is only one pathway out of this mess, and it's through a unified pro-democracy opposition party. I don't think we have it yet, but we're a heck of a lot better off right now than we were 6 weeks ago.
And you make an excellent point, Ezra, that when Democrats do a good thing, that people who are listening, call your member of Congress and tell them they did a good thing, because so often that we talk about the ones we're disappointed with. So
Yeah.
speaking of the budget deal, which this Friday, it's the end of money. And
Yeah.
I see the House deal, and it's going to give Musk and Trump more power in a way, at least on paper, and
Yep.
increase funding for the military and
Yep.
cut other programs. They could pass it in the House if they keep
They could.
intact. The Senate, unless something were to change, they're going to need 7 Democrats
That's
with
right.
the filibuster. So what do you think? I mean, what would you like to see Democrats do? Can they shape it at least and make it a little bit better where it's a little bit more palatable? Or do you think shutting down the government until the Republicans come to their senses is actually a move they should try?
Well, let's be clear. Republicans have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. You are right that they need 7 votes in the Senate to get a funding bill through, but they have not negotiated with Dems on this. They went in their own caucus, the Republicans did, and wrote up their own bill that gives MAGA some, friendly goodies
Right.
that increases the power of the administration to unilaterally decide what gets implemented, doesn't get implemented, that increases military spending and cuts other spending. And then now they're saying, "Hey, Dems, you got to vote for this, otherwise we're going to blame you for the shutdown." Come on, I'm sorry. If you don't have the votes to pass it on your own, that's on you. You are shutting down the government. So first of all, if I were a Democratic senator or representative, I would say that. Great, you want my vote? Here's the cost. Here's what you got to give me. You got to rein in what Musk is doing, and you got to do a clean CR. That's a clean funding bill. I don't want any goodies for MAGA. If you have the votes to pass it, you can give MAGA whatever you want. That's your right. But if you don't have the votes to pass it on your own, you got to come to me, and that's the requirement. And if you don't agree to that, it's your fault. You are shutting down the government. You are shutting down negotiations. And I think every Democrat as a backstop ought to say, look, you want to reopen the government? I'll give you a free 2 weeks. 2 weeks. You have 2 weeks. We'll fund the government. We'll go back to the negotiating table. And if you don't do it by then, I'll give you another 2 weeks. And if you don't do it by then, I'll give you another 2 weeks. And maybe they never agree to protections against what Musk is doing. But you know what they'll then have to do? They'll have to spend 2 weeks after 2 weeks after 2 weeks negotiating with them instead of doing other damage that they want to do. And I think that's a good place to be.
I think that's a great strategy, and I hope Democrats do it because Republicans do have the House, Senate, and the White House. If the government shuts down, most people are not going to look at the nuance of the filibuster. Like, wow, these Republicans. And meanwhile, anyone looking at their 401k or IRA or stock portfolio misses Joe Biden now. So you've already got that building in where these guys are governing horribly. I mean, Trump, I don't want to be conspiratorial, but, and maybe it's not, Trump is intentionally hurting the economy. And he's even saying we're going to have a period of transition. And we all know, because we've covered on the show, in the economic downturns, the rich, the oligarchs get richer. They always do. They got richer during COVID. And I wonder if some of the reason Trump doesn't care is that his bankrollers are going to get richer and have more money on the other side of it. What is your sense of what's going on? Because it's really a level of incompetence with the economy I've never seen. He got a good economy and he's intentionally driving it to the ground.
Yeah, look, I think if your goal is American economic prosperity, you do not behave the way he's behaving, and not just in terms of, for instance, instituting tariffs, but in the unpredictable way you're going
Right.
about doing it. It is very difficult if you are a business owner to lead in this environment. It is very difficult if you're an American consumer to afford the price of anything anymore because the prices continue to skyrocket directly as a result of his policies. So what is his game plan here? I think this is a place where we see the weakness of the MAGA coalition because Donald Trump is facing different political incentives and economic incentives than the Republicans who are going to have to run for re-election next year. They are not going to want to run for re-election in a recession because everybody who pays attention to politics knows the ruling party gets blamed for the status of the economy. I don't
Sure.
care what messaging you're going to engage in. If we're in a recession in 2026, good luck, Republicans. There is going to be a massive wave, and you could stand up to Trump now. You could do so. Look, if 5 Republicans in the House switch parties tomorrow, this would be over. This would be
Yep.
over. And I say that not facetiously, that is real. And there are more than 5 members of the House of Representatives who are going to lose their jobs next year, and they will deserve it if they decline to stand up. So they are not there yet, They're not even openly criticizing Trump and Musk hardly at all yet. But the more it becomes clear that their destinies diverge, that Trump is self-enriching and their political future is in danger, the more likely you are to see those defections. We've got to amp up the pressure, though, to make clear that that is the divergence that is on the horizon.
Yes, very much so. And, you've got Trumpers saying the economy is Biden's fault. I don't know. I guess in Trump world that plays. I'm not really worried about that argument because we know the real world. You can't tell people the economy is better or worse than they feel it. And they always blame the president and not his party for
Yeah.
what's going on, for right or for wrong. So I'm not really worried about that one. Like they can say whatever they want, but because Trump is in our face every day, 20 times a day, and he's not talking about the economy and he's not stressing what he should be doing, he's making it worse. So, this is, as I mentioned, Ezra, at the top, this is Fight Back Week. So I wanted to have people on who could talk about what their organizations do. And you mentioned it, if people want to get involved in Indivisible, how can they do it? And what's up and coming? What can they get engaged and involved in?
Look, the number one thing is don't wait for somebody to tap you on your shoulder and give you direction. This is Indivisible is built by folks who are on the ground and volunteers who are not professional politicos. They are nurses and teachers and IT technicians and workers who figured out that if they don't stand up, they're not going to see the change they want to see. You identify what your leverage is in the community where you live. Maybe you've got a Democratic member who could fight harder. Maybe you have one who could be cheered on. Maybe you've got somebody at the local city council level who you could push. Maybe you've got a US senator who is doing a good job and you need to support them in doing it. But all of this has to come down to you. If you're listening to this, you're a smart person, you're paying attention to politics. Nobody else knows more or is better equipped or has more authority than you and your community members, but you got to organize because in our country, individuals don't have much power. That's just the truth. Unless you're super rich or super famous, you don't have much political power. But as a group, you do have power. If you get a few dozen, few hundred, few thousands in the case of some indivisible groups together, you can actually change things. And when we all do that in communities across the country, that's what ladders up to actual national change. So what I would recommend you do, go to indivisible.org and find your local Indivisible group. If you don't find one that floats your boat, start your own. You can do that. That's fine. That's great. That's encouraged. But you got to take that action and start leading it.
And if they want to start their own, do they just contact you, like as a logistical
They
way?
just call my cell phone. No, yes, they just you can register a new Indivisible group.
Okay.
People, we have organizers around the country who can walk you through exactly what it looks like. But like I said, it is March 10th. We've had dozens of new Indivisible groups start this month alone. It started by folks who are looking to organize their community, and it's what is going to be driving town halls next week. Next week, we have the next congressional
Ah,
recess where senators and House members should be back home. But you know what? Republicans have already announced, no, we're hiding from our constituents. We're not going to hold those. So what are we doing? Innovation and escalation. That's what you have to do. When you have an effective tactic and the other side adapts, you've got to then adapt yourself. They are hiding. So indivisible groups are going to be putting on empty chair town halls, missing member town halls. So
ah.
in Republican districts, they'll host an event, they'll have local media, maybe other elected officials, they'll invite the member of Congress, and if they don't show, they'll be ready with a cardboard cutout or somebody in a clown costume or a chicken costume or a live chicken on stage, whatever it is, to demonstrate not only are these Republicans extremists for backing up Elon Musk, they're also cowards. They're also refusing to face their constituents. And you can do many things and hold your seat in Congress. It is hard to hide from your constituents for multiple years.
I couldn't agree more. Very last thing, what's your reaction? I've had some Democratic members of Congress, Mark Pocan was on, Bonnie Watson Coleman last week. They're going to do town
Love it.
halls in other districts. Mark's going to go right on the edge.
Yeah.
Bonnie Watson's going in other districts. Are you guys involved? Is Invisible involved in any of that? And even if not, what do you think of it?
I love Mark Pocan. What a champ. He's been a real leader on this, and just want
Yep.
to call him out. Great member of Congress from Wisconsin. Yeah, he's going to Republican districts where they're not holding town halls. So smart. This is the kind of innovative tactic. And look, not everything's going to work. I want to be clear.
Right.
What I want to see is innovative ideas from our leaders like this. This is great. It pushes the envelope. It's seen as breaking some sort of norm because, oh, that's not polite. Well, you know what's not polite? backing up Elon Musk as he comes after the entire federal budget and saying nothing to your colleagues because that's slightly against the norms. Good on Mark Pocan, good on other members who are trying to think outside the box and go outside their district to bring the fight directly from the Republicans who are refusing to stand up for their constituents.
I couldn't agree more, and that's so vitally important. I keep saying it doesn't matter if Democrats are fighting, if it's not getting press and no one sees it, then it means you got to be innovative. You can't do a press conference behind a podium in the basement of the House office building somewhere and go like, "Oh, I'm fighting. No one's seeing it."
So that is so key, Dean, and such a key insight. And I hope more people absorb that, including people in Democratic House leadership, because I feel like there's a disconnect. People haven't updated their thinking to the new media landscape. You cannot look at, 10 issues polled, identify the top issue that polls well, say those talking points, and say, see, we did it. We communicated. It's like, I'm sorry, you did. You said popular things. Nobody heard it. Nobody heard it. And so it doesn't matter. You got to figure out a way to get eyeballs and eardrums on your message. And you got to do that by being innovative like Mark Pocan is doing.
Yep. I agree. Well, Ezra, thanks so much for joining, especially on the first day of Fight Back Week. Indivisible is always fighting back. They're doing great work next week. So, again, if you want to get involved, we're having people on like Ezra from different organizations to show you, join, get involved, engage. Thanks, Ezra. Have a great night.
Thanks, Dane.